Hi, grade 12s, this is your time now. We're looking at fertilization and pregnancy in humans. So, we need to focus once again on the female reproductive system, and we know that the ovary is where the ovum or the egg cell is going to be produced. These terms should now be very familiar to you. The process of ovulation is when the egg is released from the ovary and moves into the fallopian tube. We also know that it's in the fallopian tube where fertilization will take place. The egg will move then into the uterus. If the egg is fertilized, it will embed itself in the wall of the uterus, which has been thickened over the last month and is known as the endometrium. If fertilization does not take place, the egg will pass out of the body of the female together with the breakdown of the endometrium, and we call that menstruation. So we're going to look at what happens after ovulation if fertilization does take place. So this diagram shows us an enlarged version just of the ovary, the fallopian tube or the oviduct, and part of the uterus. And of course we can see this very thick endometrial lining. All right, so what are the processes that take place and that we need to focus on? First of all, the ovary releases the egg, and that is the process at number 1 of ovulation. By the way, this picture comes from past exam papers. So this is a common question that is asked is, can you plot these events? Can you describe what happens at 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5? And so each of these events has a name, and we need to be able to describe it. Here we have our little sperm cells, and that's the lucky sperm cell that is going to fertilize that egg. And so we know that number 2 is the process of fertilization that takes place in the fallopian tube. And then mitosis continues to take place. Remember, meiosis would have happened here in the ovary. Mitosis happens where that one fertilized cell will divide into 2, will divide into 4, and eventually it divides into a ball of cells that is called a morula. And finally, that will implant in the wall of, that's called implantation, in the wall of the endometrium. And this whole process from 1 to 5 takes usually about 7 to 10 days to take place. Why have I put these little pictures of mulberries here? Well, the Latin word for a mulberry is a morula, and that is precisely what this bundle of cells looks like. It's called a morula because it resembles a mulberry with all these individual cells stuck together. Now, here is our morula, and this graph shows us what happens from implantation all the way through to about week 38 of this whole process called pregnancy. And we can see that at different times of the pregnancy, different parts of the body are going to be focused on for development. And the embryo grows from something that is fairly nondescript, that looks very similar to possibly the embryo of other animals, to something that is distinctly human over this 38 to 40 week period. And finally, at around about 38 weeks, the little baby is fully developed inside the uterus. And what has to happen is that baby needs to turn around, and it needs to be located with its head down at the bottom of the cervix, ready to move through the birth canal and out of the mother. Now, we know that, if we have a look again here, here is the umbilical cord that is going to attach the baby to the mother via the placenta. We know that the placenta is formed from maternal tissue as well as fetal tissue, and that is where the exchange of material is going to take place between the mother and the offspring. So let's look at these functions of the placenta. Nutrients are going to diffuse from the mother to the offspring. We must remember that the blood of the offspring and the mother never mingle, they never mix. The blood vessels from the mother bring the food crosses over by diffusion into the blood vessels of the fetus, and the food is taken then to the fetus. Likewise, metabolic wastes come in the fetal blood vessels, diffuse from the fetal blood vessel into the mother's blood capillaries, and the mother then is able to excrete those wastes. And of course, like food and wastes, oxygen and carbon dioxide are also exchanged. And very importantly, that placenta also acts as a filter to many chemicals and microorganisms such as viruses and bacteria that can pass from the mother to the offspring. And so carefully, the mother has to be very aware of any drugs or substances that she's going to be consuming, because these can pass across to the offspring. After the break, we're going to have a look at the birth and pregnancy.